Hi.
Hello. Genesis chapter 26, Isaac, his biography. Not much of it in the book of Genesis, but this is the central chapter, really, the key chapter of Isaac's very mini biography in the book. And it seems, when you look at it, not amounting to much, so let's read it.
Okay. There was a famine in the land, besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Then the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked about his wife, and he said, "She is my sister," for he was afraid to say, "She is my wife," because he thought, "Lest the men of the place kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold." Now it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked through a window and saw, and there was Isaac, showing endearment to Rebekah his wife. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, "Quite obviously she is your wife, so how could you say she is my sister?" Isaac said to him, "Because I said, lest I die on account of her." And Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might soon have lain with her, your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us." So Abimelech charged all his people, saying, "He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death."
And Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the name of the well Esek, which means contention, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also, so he called its name Sitnah, which means enmity. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it, so he called its name Rehoboth, saying, "For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land," because Rehoboth, according to the footnote, means broad places or room. From there he went up to Beersheba, and the Lord, that is Yahweh, appeared to him the same night, and said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and will bless you, and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there, and called upon the name of Yahweh, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well.
Then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzzath, one of his friends, and Phicol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, since you hate me, and have sent me away from you?" But they said, "We have certainly seen that the Lord is with you." So we said, let there now be an oath between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, since we have not touched you, and since we have done nothing to you but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessing of the Lord." So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. And then they arose early in the morning and swore an oath with one another. And Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. It came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they were a great grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah.
The ESV says for that last verse, they made the life of Isaac and Rebekah bitter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess the thing that stands out for me, coming from our JW background, is that you have Isaac in this single chapter devoted to the excitements of his life. The biggest single thing that happens to him is Yahweh appears to him,
Mm-hmm.
verse 2. And then again, in verse 24,
Right.
Yahweh appears to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's therefore the continuity between his life and Abraham's, that Yahweh appeared to Abraham several times as well.
And it's the repeating of the promise to Abraham is repeated to Isaac.
That's right. In your offspring, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed.
Mm-hmm.
But notice the because Abraham obeyed my voice,
Yeah.
and kept my charge. So you have from the very beginning, this is not about Isaac's character, and it's not about the character of his offspring. It's because of promises made to their ancestor,
Mm-hmm.
that all of these land promises and all the other blessings are attached to the name of Isaac now.
Mm-hmm. But then I think you get this account that's so much like his father,
Mm-hmm.
in that he fears for the sake of his wife. He's afraid. And so he says what his dad said.
Yep.
It's not true at all here, but he says it because it says in verse 6, because he thought, lest the men of this place kill me for Rebekah. So he's really assuming that these people are not trustworthy or have any inclination to doing right with God. So that was like his father as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So you see kind of a negative side to him here. And you also see a positive side to him in that when the herdsmen are quarreling with him, he doesn't seem to like retaliate or do anything about it. He just moves on to a new place. And they argue about that place. He keeps moving until the arguments stop.
Yeah, and then you have to remember that Isaac, being the ancestor of Israel, is also the ancestor of Pharisaism. So you've got, in Abraham and Isaac, it appears, a character trait which doesn't give the benefit of the doubt to your neighbor.
Yeah.
He doesn't know these people, but he guesses up front that they're not going to treat him well.
And I would say as witnesses, and maybe it's kind of a religious thing too, that people with beliefs can develop this kind of assumption that God is only dealing with them and their people.
Yeah.
And that the other people, they must not be good or nice people.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're the nice people.
And that
God's with
and
us.
that tendency to separate, which is what Pharisee means,
Mm-hmm.
that tendency to separate from people that you don't quite trust, is not only religion, it's fearfulness. Because it says, this is the very first time that fear not has been used in the Bible. You wouldn't perhaps notice that.
Mm-hmm.
God has to say to him that same night, when he goes up to Beersheba, fear not, for I am with you and will bless you and multiply your offspring. So just as we find out with Abraham, and then even more so with Jacob, Isaac's son, the fear seemed to dominate most of his life.
Mm.
And then you see it in his sons too, the sons that persecute their brother Joseph.
And yet he's being blessed.
Yeah.
And he's prospering, and the people are envious of him.
Yeah.
They seem to be aware that God is blessing you.
Yeah. It's visible even to the pagans.
He had no reason really to fear, but he is fearful.
And then you see that envy was there in the Old Testament. It's here in the patriarchs. Mm-hmm. The pagans look at their life and their God and admire something, even if they resent his prosperity on one level. They also wonder about this God that is prospering him, and that's the mm-hmm. truth as to how Christianity conquered the Roman Empire. It was the envy of the Romans and mm-hmm. even the generals of the Roman army who saw that this was a moral trait that was not common in the Roman Empire, but it was common among the Christians. This fear and faith. Did I say fear? No fear. Faith. And it's not common in the world.
But I think it is interesting that verse where you said do not fear is first put there. So after an appearance from God and reassurance from him, he worships. He builds an altar and he worships. So that's an act of faith and courage.
In a pagan environment where all the power is in the other guy's hands.
To build an altar there for your God, for worship.
We shouldn't miss, though.
Proclamation.
That's right. It's public worship of a God that they perhaps have not heard of. Mm-hmm. But then there's the signification of this divine name. Yahweh is used here. Whenever the appearances occur, as with Abraham, Yahweh appeared to him. And again in verse 24, Yahweh appeared to him. So do we associate, if we're coming from a witness background, the name Yahweh with a God who appears, that is, manifests himself physically and personally, and reveals himself personally to you? In other words, an intimate relationship. Not the God of the pagans, who is a distant God, who you must approach through mediators.
So I think when I was a witness, if I ran across a scripture that said, and the Lord appeared, I don't know, I must have just read right past it and not given any significance to that phrase, appearance. So all in my mind, everything was God communicates the way he communicates now.
Indirectly.
No physical, no appearance where you see something, and even a voice out of heaven, I was thinking, if he was talking to these people. But if it says he appeared, and if it sometimes says he spoke to, why do we make those things mean the same thing?
What can we say except it's mind control?
Yeah.
I mean, it's right there in Genesis 3. They heard the voice and the sound of Yahweh walking in the garden.
Yeah.
Why did we miss it?
Well, I don't think we paid close attention to the wording of things in Scripture. And so then it becomes a real roadblock. And when you're in communication with people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, you can't see what they're talking about because you're never really looking at the phrasing in the Scriptures. You're thinking of, what does the Watchtower say this passage means or this verse means?
So we should be patient with them because we were once there. Mm-hmm. Not easy, right?
No.
You want to say, read what the text says and believe it.
I do think that's your safeguard, is learn how to read the Bible and pay attention to the words.
So for me, the great lesson here is not only the lesson of the attribute of the God who appears and reveals himself and has a personal relationship with you, but also that this God has another great attribute. He is faithful. So covenant faithfulness is not bilateral. It's not based on your covenant faithfulness. It's based on his.
Yeah.
Because of Abraham, as it says in verse 24, I will multiply your offspring and bless you because of my servant Abraham.
A demonstration of faith, of grace on God's part. Yeah.
So our link is, let's see now.
We were going to read from some of the commentaries what they said, right?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay.
Can you read the Kidner one? I think
Okay.
Kidner's is pretty profound.
Oh, okay. Kidner says, typically human, Isaac mixes faith and fear, an incompatible combination, which can give a special quality of meanness to the sins of the religious, and nowhere more so than here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like what we said about being pharisaical. Somehow you're doubting. You're not giving people the benefit of the doubt, and you certainly don't think God's with them at all.
Yeah.
And yet Abimelech says, you could have made us guilty. He recognizes this is wrong.
As Pharaoh did in Abraham's case, right? Griffith Thomas says, does not this show clearly that God never meant him even to go to Gerar? This is commenting on, he went up to Beersheba and the Lord appeared to him the same night. By this divine appearance the same night, it is evident that Isaac was at last in line with God's will and could receive a divine revelation. Now, I wouldn't have thought of that because Abraham stepped out of the Lord's will and went to Egypt. There's no prayer involved in that. There's no command from the Lord. And Thomas goes on to say, this is the first time that we have the now familiar title, the God of Abraham. Isaac is told not to fear, that he can rely upon the divine presence and blessing and upon the fulfillment of the promise to his father Abraham. I think we also had a quote from McLaren, right?
Okay. McLaren says, the salient feature of Isaac's life is that it has no salient features. He lived out his 180 years in quiet, with little to make history. Few details of his story are given, and some of these are not very creditable. He seems never to have wandered far from the neighborhood of Beersheba.
Well, yeah, we commented at the beginning that he doesn't have a very exciting life compared to some of his ancestors, even his father. And Jacob's life is told in, 25 chapters after this. So there's a lot of stuff there that we have to give attention to. But Isaac's life seems pretty tranquil, and his personality seems a little passive. So we find out in the next chapters, we kind of already have, that Rebekah seems to be the dominant personality.
Yeah.
But Isaac is noteworthy because he benefits from the promises given to his father and passes them on. And that's about the story of most of us, isn't it? That we benefit from the promises, even though our lives may not be dramatic, and we don't do anything really exciting, but pass on to our children the things that the Lord has taught us. Isaac does that.
So the links were a video about the meaning of the name of Yahweh.
Yeah, from the Divine Names sequence. So I think the third or the fourth video in that sequence we'll put on your screen, because it explains the connection between the name Yahweh and the God who manifests himself literally and also communicates with us directly. And also the Tetragrammaton playlist, which is quite extensive by now. We'll put that on the screen too.
Okay.
See you soon.